What's your doctor friend tell you to do?
My doctor friend? We'll get to him later on.
Oh, I see. You want to talk about him now, huh?
We'll get to the doctor. You know, we got a few things to say about him, too, but the thing is, you got to meet the right people.
Right people are important.
I meet the wrong people, Johnny. Always meet the wrong... Last week, I met the Surgeon General. He offered me a cigarette. You got to do what my friend the doctor does. You mean Dr. Vinny Boom Box?
That's the one.
Yes, that's what you're
Vinny
talking
Boom
about.
Box.
He keeps away from people. Goes out in his boat alone, stays in his boat, and is always writing on a boat. Wait, in fact, his new book is all about boats.
Oh, what's it called?
Oh, great book. It's called Should a Man Buy a Yacht If His Girlfriend Laughs at His Dinghy?
Good morning. It's Thursday, Delta Force Thursday, March the 21st, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have the patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and Inside Delta Force. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, and we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah, and the men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home. The old church bells will peal with joy, hurrah, hurrah, to welcome home our soldier boy, hurrah, hurrah. The village lads and lassies say with roses they will strew the way, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, oh, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home. Get ready for the Jubilee, hurrah, hurrah, and we'll give the hero 3 times 3, hurrah, hurrah. The laurel wreath is ready now to place upon his loyal brow, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home. Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home. With love and friendship on the day, hurrah, hurrah, their choicest treasures then display, hurrah, hurrah. And let each one perform some part to fill with joy the warrior's heart, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, oh, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home. When Johnny comes marching home again, hurrah, hurrah, we'll give him a hearty welcome then, hurrah, hurrah. The men will cheer and the boys will shout, the ladies they will all turn out, and we'll all feel glad when Johnny comes marching home.
Thank you. Now a little combat radio chatter from 1944.
Go ahead, over. This is Hound Dog 7, fire mission. Enemy troops estimate company size and 2 tanks moving west on road 48. Coordinates 179er 322. My position 323 481. Will adjust. Over. This is Sugar 50. Sending you 1 round, Willie Peter. Wait. Hound Dog 7. On the way. Splash. How do we look, over? Sugar 50. Close but short. Up 200. Left 15. Over. Roger, Hound Dog 7. On the way. Wait. Splash. This is Hound Dog 7. Target. Fire for effects. Over. Wilco, Hound Dog 7, sending you 10 rounds HE and 5 Willie Peter. On the way. Impact in 8 seconds. Over. Sugar 50, this is Hound Dog 7. Nice shooting. Target all but wiped out. What is left is heading 23 Skidoo back to home. Over. Roger, Hound Dog 7. Glad we could help. Nice.
And that was a little bit of combat radio from 1944, where they were zeroing on some German tanks. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the patriotic shorts.
The M1 Abrams, upon engine startup, sounds more like a military aircraft getting ready to take off. The M1 Abrams is the only tank in the world powered by a turbine engine. The turbine engine, typically used for jet aircraft, is an engine designed for high-speed operation with minimal weight. A counterintuitive choice for a heavy battle tank. So, why was it chosen? The turbine engine would give the M1 2 huge advantages. They are much lighter than an equivalent diesel engine, weighing just 1.1 tons and developing 1,500 brake horsepower. The V12 diesel engine of the Challenger 2 produces 1,200 brake horsepower with 2 tons of metal. This compactness and extreme high power to weight ratio allows the M1 to stack on layers of armor without sacrificing acceleration or top speed.
At midnight, a German reconnaissance plane came over and started taking pictures. They had these handkerchief-sized parachutes with magnesium flares in there that lighten up the sky better than daylight. And our anti-aircraft then started shooting up at them. Somebody came to relieve me at 7:30 in the morning. At 7:30, they said, "You're off, Jake." So I went to my foxhole, and here Madison Rich was getting up from his, and he reached down and picked up his rifle off of my litter, and it broke in two. A piece of shrapnel from our gun shooting at that reconnaissance plane came down and hit that rifle and broke that rifle in two. There is a God. There is a God.
It was just too juicy of a target for us not to go hit. The whole village erupts on us, machine gun fire everywhere. There's a lot of luck in combat. Your luck will run out. AK-47 round went through my arm. I have grenade shrapnel all on my right side. They just put $50 million helicopters in the middle of bad guy country. I'm here today because of what those guys did. 9/11 happened and everything changed. I went off to training for a little bit over a year to get my Green Beret. I couldn't wait to actually get to do my job on the field of battle. I did not join the military to guard a gate. I joined to go to war. I was 4 deployments in before I went to the Delta Force, because I don't think people really understand how close the relationship Delta and SAS have. I started training SWAT teams and got into police training. So I started First Responder Coffee Company. 6 months later, I started First Responder Cigar Company. Last year, we raised over $20,000. It gives me a reason to wake up and work hard again.
My dad was very proud of me when I had the butter bars on and when I was commissioned and came home. We went out on a little night on the town. It's the first time he ever did that. He went to show me off. He was in the bar business, so he knew everybody in every bar in Atlantic City. I think we went to every one of them that night. He went to show me off.
My dad and his team, this narcotics task force, steal an entire plane of cocaine from Pablo Escobar. Peak war on drugs. The cartels had influence over governments. They bring it to the United States. These are pallets of cocaine. I remember walking into San Luis Obispo. My mom, my brother, sister, and I grabbed some pies. We walk into this storage area, and there's 2 pallets of cocaine, and my dad and all of his colleagues they're sitting there with MP5 suppressed. There's a Porsche and a Lamborghini, and I just hand off these pies. And then we go. They took that cocaine and they gave it to regional distributors. Those distributors then gave it to like street dealers. And then in 1 week, they went and arrested all of the distributors and all of the dealers. Hundreds of these people on the whole entire West Coast. They didn't lose a single gram of cocaine. Wow. They're good.
When I left the war zone, when I became SEAL instructor, and in that selection, in famous or infamous, however, depends how you look at it, selection, I apply some of these lessons that I learned to make our students better, to prepare them better for combat, to prepare them to be a better SEAL. So I'm very proud of it.
He had barely graduated high school when he found himself on a speck of coral called Peleliu, site of one of the most ferocious battles in the Pacific Theater. He was William Colgan, a Navy corpsman with the 3rd Battalion, 1st Marine Division. Through the smoke and haze of mortar fire, Colgan could see the forwarded forces were pinned down by intense Japanese crossfire and shelling, and he could hear the wails of agony and pain, the cries of anguish and death as they came under unrelenting enemy fire. He was ordered to stay back. It was too dangerous to provide aid to the wounded. But Colgan ignored the order, advancing 300 yards on his belly before reaching the men. He saved the lives of at least a dozen Marines that day and gave comfort to those who couldn't hang on any longer. On the crawl back, he was shot 3 times, but still traversed the 300 yards before dying in the arms of his commander. William Colgan was awarded the Navy Cross for his heroics.
Major Horace Carswell piloted a B-24 bomber in a one-plane strike against a Japanese convoy in the South China Sea on the night of October 26, 1944. Taking the enemy force of 12 ships by surprise, he made one bombing run at 600 feet, scoring a near miss on one warship and escaping without drawing fire. He circled, fully realizing that the convoy was alerted and would meet his next attack with a barrage of anti-aircraft fire, began a second low-level run, which culminated in 2 direct hits on one of the tankers. A hail of steel from Japanese guns riddled the bomber, knocking out 2 engines, damaging a third, crippling the hydraulic system, puncturing 1 gasoline tank, ripping uncounted holes in the aircraft, and wounding the co-pilot. But Major Carswell controlled the plane's plunge toward the sea and carefully forced it into a halting climb in the direction of the China shore. On reaching land, where it would have been possible to abandon the crippled bomber, one of the crew discovered that his parachute had been ripped by flak and rendered useless. Major Carswell continued onward until the 3rd engine failed. He ordered the crew to bail out while he struggled to maintain altitude, and refusing to save himself, chose to remain with his comrade in an attempt to crash landing. He died when the plane struck a mountainside and burned.
What is your take on women in special operations?
It just complicates things way too much. And there's the emotional thing, like men are protectors, especially the men in those communities. Like now, if we're going through a door and going in a room to kill people, like now my focus is on protecting her because just men are going to develop like a little sister personality towards her. The people that are making these decisions never lived on a ship. They never sat in a hide for 6 days in a plastic bag.
I'm not saying they don't have a place at all.
No.
But, you know, when you break up a team dynamic, the minute another sex is injected into that team, it changes the entire dynamic. It inserts drama, it inserts jealousy, there's sexual relations, and it just breaks up the team dynamic. You know, the argument is, well, the guys should be more professional. F*** you. Mm-hmm. The President of the United States several times has had affairs. This shit goes on all the way up to the highest level, so if you don't hold your own president accountable for that shit, don't hold an operator.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, a little motivation.
You only get 24 hours in a day. And the difference between Oprah and the person that's broke is Oprah uses her 24 hours wisely. That's it. Listen to me. That's it. You get 24. I don't care if you broke, you grew up broke. I don't care if you grew up rich. I don't care if you're in college, you're not in college. You only get 24 hours.
If I start insulting you in another language, you feel nothing. They don't mean anything to you because it's you who puts the meaning to it. Me, I know what it means, but it doesn't matter how hard I scream them to you. You might start laughing. Take their words, take away the value of the words and drop them to the floor. If you take that away, they fall to the ground. They never get to touch you. They are nothing.
And you conquer in the dark. When you make it personal, what you do behind closed doors matters. So I'm just wondering when you're going to make it personal. When you're going to make it about what it looks like that nobody sees. The part of you that nobody sees. Where's your integrity behind the scenes? Come on, where are your values behind the scenes? What do your habits look like behind the scenes? Come on, what kind of work are you putting in behind the scenes?
And anytime anybody's told me I'm crazy, I've always thanked them for that. Because it gave me the ability to see and do things that other people can't do, and acknowledge things that other people won't acknowledge.
Failure has made me who I am today. Failure gives you two choices. You stay down or you get up. Well, I'm up and I am fired up because I have figured it out.
You're still here. And you know what that means? That means there's still a chance for things to get better. It's only a matter of time. We gotta keep pushing through because the greatest days of our life are coming.
You have power. You have strength. You have courage. All you got to do is use it. Put it out there. Ignite that fire and keep going. Don't you give up now. Don't you say that you don't have it anymore. I know we've been there. I know I've been there. Many people have been there. They didn't think that they could carry on, but they kept going anyway.
What do you hope your legacy is?
That love is what really matters. In the long run, it's what really matters. That love, when you get down to the basic center aspect of what healing is all about, it's about love and life. Love and life keep us alive and keep us healthy. It's the very essence of our being.
You will get to where you need to be. It's not going to be easy. It's a challenge. And sometimes it can be a struggle. But what's wrong with a little struggle? That's how you get better in life. That's what makes you a better person. That's what's going to make you better in anything you do in life. Don't get comfortable. Don't get complacent. Understand the struggles are going to come. Understand they're going to be challenges. But love yourself. Get inside yourself and love you.
I was not given a scholarship to play at any Division I university. My father and mother told me to stay after my dream, and I've officially accomplished the best thing in this sport with a group of guys who mean the world to me. As the season went along, nobody gave us any inclination that we were the best team in the NFL. The fact that we were able to overcome everything, just keep moving forward.
There is no easy.
And that was a little motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Law for March the 21st.
March 21st. The Universal Master. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's mastery was not over this subject or that one, but in the connections between them, based on decades of deep observation and thinking. Goethe epitomized what was known in the Renaissance as the ideal of the universal man, a person so steeped in all forms of knowledge that his mind grows closer to the reality of nature itself and sees secrets that are invisible to most people. Today, some might see a person such as Goethe as a quaint relic of the 18th century, and his ideal of unifying knowledge as a romantic dream.
But in fact, the opposite is the case, and for one simple reason. The design of the human brain, its inherent need to make connections and associations, gives it a will of its own. Although this evolution might take various twists and turns in history, the desire to connect will win out in the end, because it is so powerfully a part of our nature and inclination. Aspects of technology now offer unprecedented means to build connections between fields and ideas. In any way possible, you should strive to be a part of this universalizing process, extending your own knowledge to other branches, further and further out. The rich ideas that will come from such a quest will be their own reward. Daily Law. Extend your knowledge further and further, leading to wide-ranging connections. Mastery, Chapter 6. Fuse the intuitive with the rational. Mastery.
And that was the Daily Law for March the 21st, The Universal Master, from the book The Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Your being increases in the measure that you give it away. Put that on your refrigerator. Live by it. Every instinct in us says, no, take things to yourself. Hang on to them. Hoard them. Keep them. Make sure you've got enough. People want some, keep them at bay. That's your possession. But that runs counter to the basic logic of the universe, because the creator of the universe is love. We say God is love. Love isn't something God does from time to time. It's not one of God's attributes. It's what God is, right through. Love, therefore, is the secret. Love is the great mystery, the hidden truth of all things. And the way it works is the more you give of your life, that's what love means, to will the good of the other, the more the divine grace increases in you.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, if you want to see hatred, do not look at wars or concentration camps. These are merely its consequences. Look at the writings of Kant, Dewey, Marcuse, and their followers to see pure hatred. Hatred of reason and of everything it implies, of intelligence, of ability, of achievement, of success, of self-confidence, of self-esteem, of every bright, happy, benevolent aspect of man. This is the atmosphere, the leitmotif, the sense of life permeating today's educational establishment. The degree of a man's hatred for reason is the measure of his hatred for himself. Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
3. The Turks entered World War I on the side of Germany. Their main enemies in the Middle Eastern theater were the British, who were based in Egypt. But by 1917, they had arrived at a comfortable stalemate. The Turks controlled a strategic 800-mile stretch of railway that ran from Syria in the north to the Hejaz, the southwestern part of Arabia, in the south. Due west of the central part of this railway line was the town of Aqaba on the Red Sea, a key Turkish position from which they could quickly move armies north and south to protect the railway. The Turks had already beaten back the British at Gallipoli, see Chapter 5, a huge boost to their morale. Their commanders in the Middle East felt secure. The English had tried to stir up a revolt against the Turks among the Arabs of the Hejaz, hoping the revolt would spread north. The Arabs had managed a few raids here and there, but had fought more among themselves than against the Turks. The British clearly coveted Aqaba and plotted to take it from the sea with their powerful navy, but behind Aqaba was a mountain wall marked by deep gorges. The Turks had converted the mountain into a fortress. The British knew that even if their navy took Aqaba, they would be unable to advance inland, rendering the city's capture useless. Both the British and the Turks saw the situation the same way, and the stalemate endured. In June 1917, the Turkish commanders of the forts guarding Aqaba received reports of strange enemy movements in the Syrian deserts to the northeast. It seemed that a 29-year-old British liaison officer to the Arabs named T.E. Lawrence had trekked across hundreds of miles of desolate terrain to recruit an army among the Hawaitat, a Syrian tribe renowned for fighting on camels. The Turks dispatched scouts to find out more. They already knew a little about Lawrence. Unusually for British officers of the time, he spoke Arabic, mixed well with the local people, and even dressed in their style. He had also befriended Sheriff Faisal, a leader of the Arab revolt. Could he be raising an army to attack Aqaba? To the extent that this was possible, he was worth watching carefully. Then word came that Lawrence had imprudently told an Arab chief, secretly in Turkish pay, that he was heading for Damascus to spread the Arab revolt. This was the Turks' great fear, for a revolt in the more populated areas of the north would be unmanageable. The army Lawrence had recruited could not have numbered more than 500, but the Hawaitat were great fighters on camel, fierce and mobile. The Turks alerted their colleagues in Damascus and dispatched troops to hunt Lawrence down, a difficult task given the mobility of the Arabs and the vastness of the desert. In the next few weeks, the Englishman's movements were baffling, to say the least. His troops moved not north toward Damascus, but south toward the railway town of Ma'an, site of a storage depot used to supply Aqaba, 40 miles away. No sooner had Lawrence appeared in the area of Ma'an, however, than he disappeared, re-emerging over 100 miles north to lead a series of raids on the railway line between Amman and Damascus. Now the Turks were doubly alarmed and sent 400 cavalry from Amman to find him. For a few days there was no sign of Lawrence. In the meantime, an uprising several miles to the south of Ma'an surprised the Turks. An Arab tribe called the Dumanea had seized control of the town of Abu el-Lisal, directly along the route from Ma'an to Aqaba. A Turkish battalion dispatched to take the town back found the blockhouse guarding it destroyed, and the Arabs gone. Then suddenly something unexpected and quite disturbing occurred. Out of nowhere, Lawrence's Hawaitat army emerged on the hill above Abu el-Lisal. Distracted by the local uprising, the Turks had lost track of Lawrence. Now, linking up with the Dumanea, he had trapped a Turkish army at Abu el-Lisal. The Arabs rode along the hill with enormous speed and dexterity, goading the Turks into wasting ammunition by firing on them. Meanwhile, the midday heat took its toll on the Turkish riflemen, and having waited until the Turks were sufficiently tired, the Arabs, Lawrence among them, charged down the hill. The Turks closed their ranks, but the swift-moving camel cavalry took them from the flank and rear. It was a massacre. 300 Turkish soldiers were killed, and the rest taken prisoner. Now the Turkish commanders at Aqaba finally saw Lawrence's game. He had cut them off from the railway line on which they depended for supplies. Also, seeing the Hawaitat's success, other Arab tribes around Aqaba joined up with Lawrence, creating a powerful army that began to wend its way through the narrow gorges toward Aqaba. The Turks had never imagined an army coming from this direction. Their fortifications faced the other way, toward the sea and the British. The Arabs had a reputation for ruthlessness with enemies who resisted, and the commanders of the forts in back of Aqaba began to surrender. The Turks sent out their 300-man garrison from Aqaba to put a stop to this advance, but they were quickly surrounded by the swelling number of Arabs. On July 6th, the Turks finally surrendered, and their commanders watched in shock as Lawrence's ragtag army rushed to the sea to take what had been thought to be an impregnable position. With this one blow, Lawrence had completely altered the balance of power in the Middle East. Interpretation.
And that was the 33 Strategies of War. Maneuver them into weakness. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you should be voting Republican. And if you're a Democrat woman, because we are the party of women. We're the party of strong women. We know that abortion does not empower women. As a matter of fact, it empowers men. Men are the beneficiaries of abortions, not women. So remember, if you're a Democrat woman, you need to vote Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you. You must frame the argument correctly if you want to win. Describing the people that live on the street as homeless is wrong. Homelessness describes people that are victims, people that have no place to live because of catastrophic events that are beyond their control. The people that live on the street are self-destructive and should be properly described as trespassers or vagrants or squatters or even bums. Migrants is wrong. Animals migrate. Human beings immigrate and emigrate. People that come to our country are immigrants, and if they have cheated to get here, they are illegal immigrants. Describing a mass murder as a mass shooting is incorrect. A mass shooting is what happens at a gun range. A mass murder is what happens at an elementary school. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Varney and Company with a substitute teacher here.
Thank you. Dozens of artists, by the way, left South by Southwest Festival in Austin in protest of the Army's sponsorship. Now, one veterans group is responding. Lauren, what did they say?
Yeah, I just want to highlight that. Actually, 80 bands and artists say they can't perform at a festival because it's sponsored by the Army. RTX, its subsidiaries, and BAE Systems. Because they make weapons of war, arming Israel against Palestine, and they call the sponsors, including the Army, genocide profiteers. I mean, that's the context of what we're talking about. And one of those groups is responding. Here you go. The VFW fully supports free speech, but seems the artists who pulled out of this year's South by Southwest Festival seem to have forgotten it's the good men and women of the U.S. Army who fought and died for their opportunity to perform in the U.S. or not. I mean, that was just so beautifully said. Some of the protesters are saying they're not going to be returning until South by cuts its ties with its defense sponsors.
So the South by Southwest could and should respond in kind and simply put out a statement that says those 80 groups are banned. They're banned from any and all concerts by Southwest, and they are not welcome back until they apologize and they demonstrate their support for the United States of America and the United States military. That's what should happen. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now we're going to pick up where we left off with Inside Delta Force. When we left it, the author and some of his teammates had gone to Honduras to deal with a hijacking there. And it turned out that they didn't need to storm the plane after all. It ended up without any bloodshed and just the way he said he liked it. So this is the next part of Inside Delta Force.
Master Sergeant Otto Clark died during Desert Storm. trying to rescue his wounded comrade, Pat Hurley. Pat also died in the attempt. We weren't home very long after that before something else called for our attention. We spent the better part of a year planning the invasion of a small tropical country that had managed to get itself on the U.S. government's shit list. I won't name the country. It would serve no purpose now and would just hurt their feelings. The invasion was planned as quite a substantial operation. Along with Delta Force, participants were to include the 1st Ranger Battalion, a brigade-sized Marine amphibious unit, and fighters and bombers from the Navy and the Air Force. By the time we completed the final rehearsal for the attack, the cost of the preparations for this extravaganza had exceeded $1 billion. Now what, you might ask, could a little country do to get itself into such a notorious position that the greatest power in the world felt so threatened that it had no choice but to make war? Simple. It had decided to tax the largest corporate concern located within its borders. But this wasn't just any company. This was a huge and powerful American corporation. As the largest and wealthiest entity in this small country, this company was smugly accustomed to having its own way. And having its own way did not include paying taxes to its poor third world host. When the American corporation's efforts to stave off the implementation of that tax proved unsuccessful, the company took its concerns to Uncle Sam, where it found a sympathetic ear. It was quickly decided that such a tax rammed down the throat of one of America's largest, most respected companies was not only wrong, it was communist. But the issue was eventually resolved another way. The CIA did one of the things it knows how to do, and do well. A young man in that small nation's military, along with a number of his friends, was induced to revolt and commence a small-scale guerrilla war. And surprisingly, one of the central tenets of the guerrilla group's manifesto was a provision firmly opposed to the taxation of foreign corporations. Before long, concordance was reached. The old president agreed to step down, the guerrillas came out of the forest, the obnoxious tax law was repealed, and everybody went back to the carefree and light-hearted ways of before. There would be no invasion, at least not of that country. But we had a custom-tailored invasion plan sitting on the shelf, an expensive one, and it seemed a shame to let it go to waste. I was on my way home from a trip to Korea. I had been working as an advisor to the South Korean military as they struggled to devise and build a counterterrorism force. Their objective was to have the outfit up and running before Korea hosted the upcoming Asian Games, and they would use those games as a dress rehearsal for their security forces in anticipation of Seoul hosting the Summer Olympics. It had been a long, tiring trip. The Koreans are a dynamic people, and they approach every undertaking with unrelenting intensity. Just being around that much focused activity will wear you out. But there was another concern nagging at me on the long flight back from Seoul. At the airport, just before boarding, I had seen a television news flash. An explosives-laden truck driven by a suicide bomber had attacked the U.S. Marine barracks in Beirut. Hundreds were dead, and many more were wounded. An attack like that wouldn't go unpunished, and we knew just where to strike. For months now, we'd been tracking several of the most active terrorist cells in Beirut, and we were ready to make a clean sweep of them. It wouldn't put an end to the terrorist activity in the region, but it sure would put them out of action for a while. I fully expected a return engagement in Beirut. It was late at night when we landed in Fayetteville, and as I walked into the terminal, one of the first people I saw was Don Feeney's wife, Judy. We were old and close friends, but I knew she wasn't here to meet me. After we said hello, she told me she was meeting her cousin, who was attending the Special Forces officers course. Then she turned me to the side and spoke in a low voice. "Eric, Donnie got called in less than an hour ago. It's a full alert. If you want to go straight to the unit, I'll stop by your house and let your family know where you are." Damn, I'd gotten back just in time. This was moving faster than I had anticipated. I had no time to waste. "Thanks, Judy. That's very sweet of you. Just say I'll be home when I can." "Sure, Eric. That's the one we hear all the time." she said. Then she gave me a hug and said, "You and Don be careful. All of you be careful." "We always are, Judy," I said over my shoulder as I headed for the parking lot. Even then, Judy Feeney was one of the most capable, courageous women I'd ever known. In the years to come, she'd prove a cool head and steady hand in the many dangerous child rescue missions she and Donnie have undertaken around the world. In fact, the last 2 child rescues I've executed were with Judy. One of the hardest things about responding to a bowstring alert is making yourself drive the speed limit as you make your way to the unit. Every fiber of your being is screaming, "Let's go! Get this damn thing moving!" But you have to resist the urge. You can't afford to draw attention to yourself, and the last thing you want to do is get a speeding ticket. But it was midnight on a Sunday, the traffic was light, and I made good time across Fayetteville and Fort Bragg to our Butner Street compound. When I got there, the parking lot was as full as on a Monday morning. I went in through the side gate and down the long corridor to my troop bay. One of my squadron mates, Darrell Evans, was coming out of the bowstring equipment storage area, pulling a dolly loaded with crates of ammunition. I grabbed the handle and helped pull the load down the hallway. "Ready to go to Beirut, Darrell?" I asked as we strained against the heavy load. "Not going to Beirut, Eric. We're making an invasion," he said with his head down as he leaned against the weight of the heavy cart. "So we're finally going to do it, eh? We're going to hit that place?" "Nope, not them either," he answered without looking up. "We're invading Grenada." Grenada? Grenada? That didn't make any sense. I'd seen President Reagan on television about a month earlier, telling the nation about the airfield the Cubans were helping to build in Grenada, but everybody knew there was no threat in that. The Cuban military had no forces that could use the airfield, and the Soviets would never hang their asses out in such a remote and indefensible place. It was just a good propaganda mission, socialist goodwill at work, helping a brother third world nation. I stuck my head in the squadron office to announce my return. Bad Bob was standing there looking at a map on the wall. He looked up as I walked in. "Grenada?" I asked. "Yep, Grenada," he confirmed. "Don't happen to have a good map of the place, do you? All I have is a Xeroxed page from a travel guide, and it ain't worth a damn. We've got a request in to Defense Mapping and to the CIA. You know what that's worth. We won't get any maps, but we'll get some damn interesting excuses," he said. "When do we leave?" I asked. "Tomorrow, or today," he said, consulting his watch. "C-5As loaded with Task Force 160 helicopters to Barbados. When we land, the helicopters will be pulled out and get their rotors assembled, and then we launch. We fly to Barbados tonight and make a pre-dawn assault into Grenada the next morning. B Squadron hits the Richmond Hill prison to liberate any political prisoners being held there. We'll also try to take the heat off the Rangers as they jump onto the airfield. Your troop has all the information. You team leaders sort it out and put your plan together." "Sure thing, Bob. A mission is a mission. But doesn't this one seem just a little flojo to you? I mean, Grenada, for Christ's sakes. If this is supposed to be in response to the bombing in Beirut, it's like shooting the dog that didn't bite you. Like when the Nicaraguans finally threw Somoza out and the Carter administration put sanctions on Guatemala. We're not just missing the target here, Bob. Hell, we're not even shooting at it." Bob held up a hand to tell me to hold my fire. "Eric, you know I don't make these decisions any more than you do. We just do the best job we can at what we're told to do and try to all come home alive." "Of course, Bob, and please believe that I'm not going off on you. Far from it. I'm just an old country boy trying to make it through this world the best I know how. But the path we're on gets a little hard to divine sometimes, like right now." "That's probably true, Eric," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "And that's why we're counting on you old-timers to get us through this one." Here is the plan we choreographed. B Squadron would form the initial element of the assault. We would fly in a lift of 7 Black Hawk helicopters from Barbados to the southernmost end of Grenada and make an airmobile assault on the hilltop fortress of Richmond Hill Prison. Once that was accomplished, we would sweep the high ground overlooking the Point Salines airfield and attack any enemy positions that might be situated to impede the dawn parachute assault the Rangers would make to secure the runway. When the Rangers secured the runway, A Squadron would land by C-141s laden with Little Bird helicopters and make an assault upon an installation known as Fort Rupert. The Ready Brigade of the 82nd Airborne Division would then start landing, and the Rangers would push inland, up a nearby valley, to capture the facilities of the Cubans who were on the island. Meanwhile, the Marines would make an amphibious landing on the northern side of the island. Once they were safely ashore, they'd sweep to the south for an eventual link-up with the Rangers. My expanded 6-man team for the operation included one brand-new team member. The latest OTC class had graduated while I was in Korea, but I had already gotten my bid in for the draft, and it was my turn for a first-round pick. I snapped up Bart Preminger, a big, tall, good-looking guy from Kansas. We had overlapped in the Ranger Battalion, where he had risen from private to sergeant in the fire support section. Following his tour in the Rangers, Bart had gone on to Special Forces and served 3 years before making it through selection. The other team members for Operation Urgent Fury, as it was called, were my old pals Smiley and Andre, plus Albert Maker, Stan Johnson, and Robert Wilson. Our task during the assault on the prison was to descend by fast rope into the prison courtyard, fight our way into the building, and release any political prisoners we found inside. From there, we would move to the hill overlooking the Point Salines airfield and assist the Rangers. All in all, not a daunting task, but we had absolutely no intelligence about what to expect or where to expect it. We had no idea if there were any prisoners in Richmond Hill. We didn't know if the place was guarded, and if it was, we didn't have any idea about the size and composition of the guard force. We didn't know how the Grenadins were organized, what kind of Cuban forces were on the island, or what type of weaponry either of them had. We didn't even have a rumor of decent maps. We were able to get our hands on a Michelin guide to the Windward Islands with a somewhat usable chart of Grenada. This allowed us to get a basic feel for the layout of the island. We would make our approach from Barbados on a flight heading of 186 degrees. We would travel in 7 helicopters, with my team in chopper number 3. Our flight path would bring us down the length of the island and carry us just to the east of the capital city of St. George's. As we neared Richmond Hill, Fort Frederick would be on the high ground, just 450 meters to our east. Just a rifle shot away from Richmond Hill, I thought as I studied the Michelin guide. The maximum effective range of an M16 is 465 meters, which brought to mind another thought. We wouldn't carry submachine guns on this mission. I had no idea what we might eventually run into, so our assault weapons would be M16s and CAR-15s. By mid-afternoon, the teams had thrashed out their individual plans, and the team leaders had coordinated their actions on the objective. But the thought of Fort Frederick sitting unmolested on the next ridgeline continued to nag at me. That place was close enough to give us some serious problems, but nobody was dedicated to hitting it. The Air Force promised to pound the place if it gave us any trouble, so we left it at that. We landed on Barbados at midnight. The C-5As were parked on the taxiway with their ramps wide open and their bellies full of folded-up Black Hawk helicopters. But the helicopter crews were nowhere in sight. I didn't know how long it took to drag a Black Hawk out of a C-5A, extend its rotors, and fold its tail into position, but I knew it had to take longer than it took us to prepare a Little Bird covert troop carrier or a Killer Egg attack helicopter. We'd been told that the Black Hawk crews didn't want our help. It was the responsibility of the maintenance teams to put the birds in flight configuration. That was all well and good, but the helicopters just continued to sit there in the bellies of those planes, and we were running out of darkness. By the time the helicopters were finally ready, we had little more than an hour before daylight. The flight time to the target was supposed to be 1 hour and 21 minutes. If we didn't make up some time en route, we'd get there just minutes before the Rangers jumped. We climbed aboard the minute the crew said they were ready, and finally we lifted off. There's no feeling in the world more exciting than making a combat assault on an enemy target by helicopter. The doors of the chopper are taken off, and you sit with your feet dangling outside, or at least you did riding the old Hueys. The Black Hawk was so fast that you had to keep your feet pulled inside until it started to slow down, just to keep from being yanked out. But the roar of the engines, the whine of the rotors, the earth whipping below, and the pounding rush of air pouring over you and ripping at your clothes make you feel like a cavalryman of old. You blast toward the target like a relentless and implacable spear hurled by the god of war. It is a stirring, phenomenally exciting feeling, one almost worth the cost of your life. We crossed the coast of Grenada on the backside of a rainstorm, just as the first light of dawn hit the eastern sky. The terrain was mountainous, with steep, jungle-covered ridges separated by deep, narrow valleys. Get ready. We slid our feet and legs over the edge of the Black Hawk's floor as we arrowed our way to the target. I was hanging my head out the doorway trying to see ahead when I heard the first rifle fire. The shots were scattered at first, but rapidly gathered impetus and volume. Then the machine guns found us, and the air was thick with tracers, red, ugly fingers trying to claw us out of the sky. The first round that hit us came from a 23mm automatic cannon. It punched into the cockpit with a shower of plexiglass and detonated a fire extinguisher, momentarily filling the bird with a thick white cloud before blowing away in the slipstream. It was the perfect mood setter. Almost immediately, the next round found the navigator, hit him high in the left shoulder, ranged through his neck, and exited his right shoulder. And this poor guy had been the only survivor of a fatal crash in Panama just the week before. Then the fire became so thick and heavy, it was impossible to keep up with what it was doing to us. From my view out the wide-open doorway, it was nothing but a storm of red searching for us, slapping and stinging us, tearing the bird to pieces, and plowing furrows through human flesh. The door gunner was hammering away with his machine gun while we all fired at the hated enemy guns on the ground. Then he stopped firing and slumped over his gun. I pulled him back and yelled over the roar of the flight, "What's the matter?" He yelled back, "I've been hit." Stan and I went down the front of his face and chest looking for a wound, but couldn't find anything. If he was hit, it wasn't an immediately fatal wound. "You're okay," I yelled in his ear, and at that reassurance he grabbed his gun and went back to firing. Parts of the helicopter were being blasted off. I could feel the heat of the rounds passing through the bird and near my face. On the other side of the chopper, Dan Bryers was gut shot and, just seconds later, hit again in the thigh. Bart took a wound to the right thigh that looked like he had been chopped with a machete. I saw his eyes go wide with the first flush of shock as he looked at his shredded leg. There wasn't much bleeding, but there was a lot of gashed flesh. I reached over and grabbed him by the arm, gave him a shake, and shouted, "Are you all right?" His eyes immediately regained their focus, and he yelled, "Yeah, I'm okay." I felt a sharp tug up my left shoulder and a stinging slap across the left side of my face and neck. The strobe light I carried attached to the shoulder of my equipment harness had been hit by a round and exploded in a spray of plastic. I reached up to feel for my left eye. It was still there and working. Then the door gunner slumped over his gun again. "What's the matter now?" I yelled. "I've been hit again." He whimpered as a look of self-pity flooded his face. Once more, I looked at his face and head and checked down across his chest and abdomen. No wounds. "You're okay," I yelled again. But he shook his head and called back, "No, I'm not. I'm hit in the back, and it's bad." Stan cut open the back of the gunner's flight suit and found two parallel ripping wounds, 2 inches apart and nearly a foot long, running from his right side to within a half-inch of his spine. I pulled the gunner out of his seat, and Stan climbed over him to take over his position behind the gun. Then we took a blast of fire so severe it seemed as if a giant's angry hand grabbed us mid-flight and shook us like a dish towel. The bird shuddered and pitched so hard I thought we would go down. but soon she regained her composure and kept flying. A heavy caliber round scorched by my face, and I took such a gasp of breath that my chest muscles cramped. For a second, I thought I had been drilled through the lungs. Then Andre slapped a hand to his right thigh and turned to look me in the face. We were sitting jammed thigh to thigh, and now we both stopped firing and looked down as he slowly pulled his hand away from his leg, and we saw that it was covered in a wad of white goo. I believe I've seen everything that can possibly come from the insides of a human being, but I had never seen anything like this. And from the look on his face, neither had Andre. We looked at his gooey hand, and then into each other's puzzled eyes, and I yelled, "What the hell is that?" The light of understanding clicked on in his face, and he yelled back with a huge grin, "Toothpaste! They shot me through my tube of toothpaste!" Andre was inordinately proud of his pearly whites, and always carried a toothbrush, toothpaste, and floss with him wherever he went, even in combat. For this mission, he had stowed his dental necessities in the right cargo pocket of his pants. A bullet had ripped through the bottom of the chopper, through the tube of toothpaste in his pocket, and then through Andre's thigh. I was worried for a second that the round might have hit his femoral artery, but he showed no signs of shock. The bullet plowed completely through his leg, coming to rest just under the skin on the top of his thigh, missing both the artery and the femur. But the firestorm wasn't over yet. We were still being pounded with gusto. I hung out of the bird again to check on the rest of the helicopters. Most of the enemy guns were firing at bird number 1, which gave them the perfect lead for hitting us. That's why our helo was taking such a pasting. Then something mule-kicked me from behind and almost threw me out of the chopper. My right hip went numb, and I felt wetness slide down my ass and leg. Oh, hell, my ass has been shot off, I thought, as I shoved my hand behind me to find the wound. Instead, I found my canteen had been blown to bits. I happily looked at my hand, wet with water and not blood. I looked behind me out the other side of the bird and saw things were just as bad on that side as they were on this one. Nothing but a sea of red tracers and wounded men. I turned back to hang outside again to try to see the target. We should have been almost there by now. Just as we took some horrifically intense fire, I saw bird number 5 break formation and dive down a deep valley, ducking under the stream of fire from a 23 millimeter. They were trailing a thick gray plume and going down fast, but they were still flying, so they weren't out of control. I hoped they could make it to a safe place and put her on the ground. Suddenly, the target loomed ahead. Albert was holding the coiled fast rope in his hand, and he got up on his knees to give it a toss as I yelled, "Get ready," to the team. As we came to a hover, Stan silenced a machine gun across the valley. We all looked down into a derelict and empty compound. The damn place was abandoned. The main gate to the prison was wide open, and so were all the doors we could see. The windows were broken, and the courtyard was overgrown with weeds and brush. The ground was littered with broken furniture and garbage. I could even smell the place from the chopper. It smelled like a urinal. Do not, don't, I yelled to Albert, shaking my head in the negative as he poised in position to throw the rope. Bob was shouting over the radio, "Let's get out of here," as he and the rest of the team leaders reached the conclusion I had. Dry hole. The choppers tilted their noses downward to pick up forward momentum and find a place free of the terrible fire we were taking. Within seconds, we were over the ocean and out of range of the guns. I looked out over the water, and what a sight. Navy ships everywhere. Great. Ships have doctors, and we needed medical help badly. Don was going into shock from his abdominal wound, and the navigator was failing rapidly. Nobody was dead on our bird, yet, but from a quick head count, it looked like we had 8 men wounded. 8 out of 15 was a pretty high ratio, but I was frankly amazed that we were still alive. And even more amazed that the helicopter was still flying. If we had flown this mission in the old Hueys, we all would have been shot down. These Blackhawks are some damn tough birds, I thought, as we skimmed over the surface of the ocean. but I had never ever seen ground fire so concentrated and effective. It was like they knew when we were coming and where we were going.
And that was Inside Delta Force from Eric L. Haney, Command Sergeant Major, retired. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.